Moving ahead to our sixth technical session, we have today's chair, Dr. Vibha Bhoot. She is here with us. We welcome you, ma'am. She is a
Thank you.
versatile personality. She's a writer and a critique and has been an erudite professor at JNV University, Jodhpur, since 17 years now. Over 50 national and international publications in different conferences and journals. She has been chairing various sessions too at national and international conferences. She has evaluated a number of theses and has been an external referee for PhD scholars nationwide. She has been appointed as an expert examiner for the Rajasthan Public Service Commission twice. At present, she is monitoring 7 research scholars, and the list of her achievements is just unending. So I'm cutting it short and welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Hello.
Thank you, Dr. Jamwan. May I continue?
Yes, ma'am. Over to
Thank
you.
you so much. Thank you. Thank you. At the outset, I would like to thank Dr. Sylvester, Dr. Roshan for giving me this platform, all the collaborators, actually all who toil hard behind the curtains as well. Thank you so much. All the delegates who presented the papers nicely. I've been hearing since morning. Beautiful papers, and congratulations to all of you. So without any uh, further much ado about anything, I'll start the session. Um, I think all the presenters are, well, I expect so. So the first, I'd like to call upon the first presenter, Utsho Chakraborty. Mr. Utsho Chakraborty.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes,
yeah, ma'am.
yes,
I'm
yes,
present.
Mr. Utsho. The title of his paper is Gender Equality for Economic and Social Development. This is a joint paper, Mr. Utsho.
Yes, ma'am. It's a
Okay,
joint paper.
okay, then over to you. Please deliver your discourse.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Uh, I'm now presenting. I hope it might be visible. Window. Just a minute, ma'am. Ma'am, is it visible?
No, you are not visible yet audible. Yes, now you are
Okay, ma'am.
visible. Thank you.
Just
Thank
a
you.
minute. Okay, ma'am. Presenting. Is my PPT visible, ma'am? Presentation slide.
No, no, I'm sorry, it isn't.
All right, like why it's not coming like that? Uh, I'm really trying to like present, but it's not like showing the presentation slide.
A couple of seconds, it was visible.
Yeah, ma'am. That's what I was like thinking. Why it's not coming? Present.
Maybe you can retry.
Yeah, I'm actually trying that, ma'am. Is my presentation now visible, ma'am?
Yes, it is. It is.
Okay. So, device is hanging actually. Is it now visible, ma'am?
Yes, yes, it is. It is. Please carry on.
Yeah. Okay. Before I start, I would like to thank Dr. Shubhra Jamwal, ma'am, as well as Dr. Viva Bhoot. Ma'am, sorry for my English. I'm from actually Bangladesh. I'm a foreign student who is
No problem,
actually
sir. No
studying my
problem.
bachelor's in engineering
Okay.
in Gujarat Technological University. And I'm from the computer engineering department. And my fellow friend, who is actually absent today because he is quite ill and he requested me to be here. And on behalf of him, I really apologize for his absence. Then again, I would like to thank the whole organization, whole team for giving us this opportunity that we are being able to represent our topic, which is about the gender equalities for economic and social development. So throughout the presentation, the things that we're going to cover is like about what do we really mean about gender equality, the advances of gender equalities, what are the advantages that we get if we are having a proper equilibrium in our gender. Then again, woman empowerment, why the woman empowerment is quite important based on the uh, outdoor workings as well as the indoor workings, and why education is an integral part of women empowerment. Then we come to the global gender gap index, as we are seeing, as well as the statistics with the World Bank perspectives. And thus we will just conclude our whole presentation. So I'm starting with the whole thing. Definition. So based, what do we like actually, what do we know about gender equality? What is shown here, it's like about the, we know about the gender equality, it's about some sexual equilibrium or equality of the sexes, which is having the state of equal access to the resources as well as the opportunities, regardless of the gender or the economic participation as well as the decision making prospect. That also like includes the state of valuing different behaviors, aspirations, as well as the needs of equality, regardless of the gender. I would also like to add here on this prospect some of the quotes. According to Shen, from 2004, he stated that there is a positive correlation that can be statistically significant between gender equality, that can be in educative purpose as well as the economic development. Furthermore, if I say the OECD released that also in 2008, they released that a sustainable economic growth overall in the national and global levels that solely depends on the active participation of women as workers with the full use of their skills and qualifications. Then we can come to the advantages of gender equality, as I have said before, that a nation's as well as global development mostly depends on the equal working strengthenance for men and women. So if we are having that equilibrium, if we are having that equality, we will be having a better economy as well as improved productivities, as well as increased growth and innovations that can be under rural, urban, or nation, or even in international platforms. Diversities of views, like why diversities of views? Because in most of developing countries like Bangladesh, like Israel, like Afghanistan, many of the views regarding the prospect of women in taking part in national or international platforms. I will not say only for this matter. If I conclude, if I add in a smaller prospect, women's in most of the rural areas are not even allowed to come outside from their own homes, let alone take part in development activities because of illiteracy rate, because of some misconceptions, and then again, the malnutritions, the people's prospect views of taking male childs, because there are some criticism and there are some racisms as well in the prospect of white people as well as the black people. while there is some concernment for gender equilibriums, then comes flexible working, then comes stable workforces, as well as employment possibilities where happier perspectives are like much more seen in the male performances. Because for the employment purpose, we can like I will definitely like tell this thing much more in the coming slides, where the statistics, where the gender gaps are being shown there, and that would be really helpful for all of us to learn the whole perspective. Then comes better quality lifestyle, where gender equality is a quite must thing, because if we are having that, the whole role of male and female working together, then we will be definitely having some greater achievements, some greater balance, some greater development throughout the nation, that can be in socio-economic, cultural, as well as political platforms. Afterwards comes the women empowerment, a social view in socioeconomic development. So what do you actually mean about women empowerment? Empowerment itself has various meanings in diverse socio-cultural and political frameworks. Usually the idea of empowerment is more or less used to describe the relationship within households surrounding underprivileged groups and people at the global scale. If I say it in a vast sense, it can be signified the growth of independent preferences and actions an individual can take using the power and their own control. And while we are concerning on the power control mechanism, there are some major four aspects, which is already shown here. And those are like power within, power to, power with, and power over. So what the main fact of power within means, it means having some self-confidence. It means having that strength to pursue their own objective. And their own objective, I most specifically mean for the strength of women's to pursue on their own objectives and plans based on the given resources. And even if there is some modifications that is quite needed, that can also be included. Next comes the power to. What do we actually mean about the power to? The power to basically describes the strength for building up skills, the necessities of the strength that is needed for a woman to have the proper skills, and using those skills to have some intra as well as interpersonal development. Then comes the power with. If I say about the power with, it is such an immense level actually. It is when a woman has the potential, the power within themselves to communicate with each other and work hand in hand with men to be able to have a social as well as economic development. Then comes the power over. The power over is also a pair of strength and potential of the woman workforce that has that immense strength that also in a global scale, altogether with the necessary resources and having the control over the whole process on achieving intra and interpersonal developments. If I say about the woman empowerment, then there is one more prospect that comes in mind, and that is education and the work. Because education plays a great role in having women empowerment as well as gender equilibriums. Then again, it also has that much strength to take a whole nation on a global scale in the aspect of development. Why? Because Clayson in 1999 have stated that gender equality in education has an effect on gender equality. That also in the employment factors, and thus having a impact on economic development. Then, if I have to add, I would also like to add here that at the global campaign of education, there is a belief, and that belief is quite strong actually, because that belief is gender equality is one of the most important human rights and a must needed thing for achieving a broader socio-political and economic development. And this is such an important fact. Such an important concentration that signified mostly in the Latin American countries. The pictures that I have added here, in the first one, a girl is shown focused on doing something with a smile. The girl represents a country called Peru, which is a Latin American country. In Peru, there has been a really important news, that is, important battles have been won with the help of education, yet the fight still continues. The gender equality is an approach or an initiative which aims to eliminate or vanish inequalities of rights between man and woman, boys and girls, to promote a cultural equity, justice, dealing with the various types of violence and discrimination throughout the woman face. And this thing has been highlighted in the citizen movement to ensure gender equality throughout Peru. On the second image, we see the journey for gender equality in education for Dominican Republic. They said that the ministry has offered us a scope of rebuilding the collective imaginary around muscularity and femininity. And the progress whatsoever we have made towards gender equality in education is a result of years of lobbying and advocacy, including open and elaborative dialogue with the Ministry of Education, specifically in gender directorates. And this quote was said by Pedro Azevedo, an executive coordinator of the Socio-Educational Forum. Thereby we can see the immense importance of having education in a global scale to have a socioeconomic development throughout gender equality. Afterwards comes the Global Gender Gap Index. This is such an important measurement. The current progress rate that is followed, it has been said that it'll take another 108 years minimum to reach gender equivalence, according to the World Economic Forum's most recent Global Gender Gap report. And across the 106 countries of the world, which has been covered since the first edition of the report, the biggest gaps that needs to be closed in the economic and political empowerment dimensions that can take place in 202 and 107 years to close, respectively. And among this performance and among this data, we can see that educational attainment subindex, as well as the health and survival subindex, measures a lot. Then comes the gender gap statistics. According to the Forum's Global Gender Gap Report, only 22% of world's AI professionals are women, in comparison with the 78% who are actually men. And this is an immense gap of having the development process. In 2012, only 14% of women starting university in OECD countries chose science-related subjects compared to 39% of men. A 2015 PISA report also adds that even after having high achieving performances, while it was asked, the whole platform came with the result that the girls were having less spirited at solving sciences and maths problem and reported higher levels of anxiety towards math. In a study of students at Cornell University in 2003, psychologists has also reported that women rated their scientific abilities lower than men, even though they performed roughly the same in a quiz. Afterwards comes the average work per week by men and women. It has been seen in the rural parts of sub-Saharan Africa that due to the lack of services and infrastructure, combined with an exceptional of household duties and limited employment opportunities for women, meaning they had to shoulder unprecedented, unequal burden of collecting water and wood for their families. And the UN report in 2011 have estimated that collectively the women spend 40 billion hours a year collecting water and wood. Then comes the best countries for gender equality. The World Bank has added that certainly 8 to 9 countries are there that are having proper gender equality, and that too on the development platforms. Countries like Iceland, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Rwanda, New Zealand, Philippines, Nicaragua. These are some of the most prominent countries having more than 72% of possibilities in working with men and women in equal terms and in equal platforms, thus gaining development results, thus gaining immense blessings in the field of both technologies, in the field of both ancient platforms. Afterwards comes the opinion of World Bank regarding equality. What World Bank has regarded based on the equality between men and women, and those are equality of opportunities and treatment in employment that are solely and most importantly needed currently for the rest of the countries, for the most of the developing countries, where many aspects are still remains for having gender equality, equal remuneration for the work of equal values, equal access to safe and healthy working environments for social securities for women and children's, equality in association and collective bargaining, equality in obtaining meaningful career developments, because career is something that is so much prominent, that is so much needed. And muchly in the most of the developed countries, it is also seen that racisms as well as many co-factors for gender equality matters a lot, where women are mostly neglected, even though they're having that much potential, that much grades, that much marks, that much eligibility to be able to have that platform, but despite they don't get. So equality in this type of measures, I solely believe, is much more needed. A much needed balance between work and home life, which is fair to both women and men. Equal participation in decision making, at all levels. Thereby, I come to the conclusion where gender equality is quite important to ensure a happier, healthier, and prosperous world. It is one of the most important fundamental human rights, which is very, and I mean very much necessary for building a sustainable world. Gender equality means equality of sexes that I have told before. Then the equal access of to the opportunities and the resources provided. Thereby, gender equality, if can be taken to the most concerned aspect, then I solely and I really, really do believe that a country can be developed not only in social terms, but also in terms of political, cultural, and economic aspects. Thank you.
Thank you. That was an excellent paper. And may I switch over to the next presenter? Because I think I'll come up and comment upon your paper later on. The next presenter is Muamren Songrin. I hope I'm pronouncing the name properly and correctly as well.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. The title for your presentation is Strengthening the Role of Women Organization and Search for Empowerment of Women in Tribal Villages, Nagaland.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
So over to you, Muamren. Please start.
respected subject expert, the moderator, and my fellow presenter, a warm greetings to all of you. The paper that I will be presenting is on strengthening the role of women organizations and church, the empowerment of women in tribal villages of Nagaland. Non-representation of women in decision making has been a major issue, and so the government, in order to deal with that, passed the 73rd Amendment in 1992 to reservation of women. Uh, was applicable in the state of Nagaland some tribes follow democracy and based representative informative party and
Excuse me, Mr. Mohammed, you are hardly audible. Please check your internet connections and your connectivity as well, please. Excuse me. Mr. Mohammed, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you are hardly audible. Please check.
These traditional institutions that follow around the chiefship, some static democracy and clan-based representative system. As a result, women are still excluded from the formal decision making. No doubt, some villages have some villages have appointed women in the village council, but majority of the village council in the villages still doesn't have women representatives. The source for this data is based on primary and secondary source. A primary source was selected through structured interviews and non-participatory observation. The study area and the respondents were based on progressive sampling. There were 25 respondents each. No doubt we have different villages to The respondents include the village chairman, village council, women leaders, villagers. Apart from that, interviews were also held with academicians, government officials, and other knowledgeable persons. So the findings based on my fieldwork and based on the interview is that some of the constraints that some of the constraints which has led to in the village non-selection of women in the village council is that the selection process in the villages still is based on indigenous selection process. Unlike in Panchayat system where there is 5 years census for all, in the tribal villages in Nagaland, we don't there is no election. Villages villages select whom they will select as a leader. And in this indigenous selection process, preference is always given to men. And as a result, women still find it difficult to be selected as a member of the village council. Cultural stereotype is very strong in but men and women private life, taking care of the family, looking after the family, those things. Whereas men, they are involved in politics. So the cultural stereotype, the gender role is still very strong. There, during the interview with the woman, especially with the woman, educated, especially those who are educated, those who are in the government, those who have a government job, what they have said is that the priority in the village is very different. When we talk about in the town areas or in the Western countries, when we talk about women equality, it's all about being in the political field. There is a desire to be part of the political process. However, what they say is that life in the villages is very simple. The priorities of the woman, especially for the woman, is their family and is their family. They are happy to be taking care of the family, and so the priorities of the village is very different. So that's one of the things. Other majority of the women are not interested in politics. No doubt, there are some certain persons, which will be a small minority, who are interested in to be part of the decision making process, but the majority of the women are not that interested to be in the decision making. As a result, they are not they are unable to go forward since majority are contented with Bhatia, so they are not able to as a woman together as a unit are not able to put forward the demand that to make women to be part of the decision making process. So these are some of the concepts that prevents women that led to non-inclusion of women in the decision making process. However, we can also see one paradox in this. Now, women are not part of the village council as a member, but compared to those villages, especially in the mainland, the so-called mainland India, where there is a reservation for women, where there is 30% reservation or 50% reservation for women, where women occupies 50 or 30%. The status of women in the villages is quite better in terms of freedom, in terms of joy, in terms of policies. Uh, like, uh, and this is by the report of the National Health Survey 2015 to 16, where it says it shows in decision making of the family, which is ahead of states like Kerala and Goa. 13% in the rural areas, 13.6% experience domestic violence, which is low level. 4% alone or jointly. So they own land or a house alone or jointly, 41%, 41.1%. In terms of enemies, which is a very what we call important issue among the women, there is 25.3% in the rural areas, which in fact outranks states like Kerala and Goa. So in terms of the issue of enemy, the villages in the Nagaland are doing much better, which outranks Kerala and Goa. Those women marrying before 18 years, it's 15.8% of them, which is only states like Kerala. So marrying in the rural area. The state is only Jahan, Kerala, and Goa. In terms of literacy rate, in the rural areas, male is 79.49%, whereas female is 72.01%. So in terms of literacy, they are also doing well. So despite this non-representation of women in the village council, why the status of women is better, we discussed during the interview. What they highlight is that yes, no, that women doesn't participate directly. They are not part of the formal decision-making body. But that doesn't mean that they don't participate. They participate, or what is very popular in USA, which is called kitchen cabinet. Kitchen cabinet is a system where close relatives or close friends influence the main decision, the heads of the nation or heads of the government, that is the president. So during lunch or during private gathering, they influence the decision-making of the decision-making body. Similarly, in the villages, in the tribal areas, kitchen cabinet is quite popular. Women, if they want something, if they want to highlight something, or if they want village council to do something for women, for the welfare of the women, they informally meet them before the decision has been made. They try to influence, they try to win the favor. So this kitchen cabinet allows enables the woman to influence the decision making of the body informally. Women organization is quite popular, is quite active in villages, especially in Mokokchung. There is Watsumongdam. The villages in Mokokchung, there is Watsupongdam. Whereas in the Donopoto, we have this Sumito Tomoi Hoho. These are some of the women organizations, and these are quite active. What the women have said is that they may not understand the modern concept of woman equality or gender equality, but anything related to women, domestic violence, issue of alcohol, issue of anything related to women, if the woman they know that they have they know that where to go. They go to the woman organization and they look after the matter. So women organization is very active in Nagaland. And they have highlighted one point where they said it's the women organization who conducts rape or alcohol. Alcohol is banned in most of the villages in Nagaland, and the responsibility to look after the checking of alcohol is done. Other this the and this one the chief and the influence of church is still very strong in tribal villages. What they focus most on is on they talk about they try to highlight the issue of what try to promote and what we call the capability of women. They want to highlight that stereotype needs to be done away with. So the church is always as a open regarding the issue of women. One can highlight one program which is organized by the church leader. They organize what we call a father's school. Every year they organize a father's school, and in that every husband has to attend it for 1 week. And during that workshop, the pastors or the leaders tell them what we call they need to take their responsibility along with women. They need to take care of the children. They need to love their wife. So some of the things done by the church also. So in terms of woman issue, in terms of women, church also playing a very active role, promoting awareness regarding gender equality of the men, also to do with some of the stereotypes that we have. So these are some of the roles done by the churches. As a result of this, the status of women or the what we call status in the villages. Apart from that, some of the measures that in order to again what we call bring about more empowerment of women is that workshop and awareness is very important. Why why the older generation, the mindset of the cultural stereotype that politics is for private life is for women is because of the what we call the indoctrination. So in the same way, if we have workshop and awareness with the younger generation or with the coming generation, when we talk about gender equality, it will create that mentality and it will be able to do away with the mindset. So workshop and awareness on just like a church which has done workshops or like other schools, workshop and awareness is a must in order to in order to down away with some of the cultural stereotypes. Project need to be handled by females. The government need to give some project to these women organizations so that they can solely handle those projects. This will enable them to have administrative experience and also enable the mentor to done away with some of the stereotypes that women cannot handle those public affairs. So projects need to be handled solely by females because if projects are what we call standardized through this village concept, it will be dominated by men. So projects need to be given to women helped by females. Leadership training through women environment, women organization. This is one of the things on the women leadership. What is it? What would you like to consider training? Training is considered so more. Leader. During the field survey, what they have highlighted is that the most important policies or the most the policies which have led to empowerment of women the most is that of policies like Anganwadi, NRLM, National Rural Livelihood Mission, and especially self-help group. These are some of the women-oriented policies which have benefited them the most, and they what we call highlighted that those more women-oriented policies need to be implemented, and this will have what we call this will lead to increasing the status or the empowerment of the women more. Skill-based vocational training. Women lack the skill to have this employment opportunity. Since they are purely based on non-skills. What they know is only some of the non-skills, so they end up doing some farming jobs and only. So the government needs to focus more on skill-based vocational training so that they can expand their horizon of employability, because we know that economic empowerment usually more or less leads to empowerment of women. So skill-based vocational training needs to emphasize more. And on the system where by they were original just the every member of
Mr. Mohammed, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you are hardly audible. Yes, you are hardly audible. I mean, we just can't even get the hang of what you are speaking all about. Please check your microphone.
Use of so right. They say that if there is an election system in the village, then there will be no unity and the village. There will not be unity in the person where create unity. We cannot also deny the fact that this village governance and this village governance in the tribal society, whatever form it is, Other reasons, they say that it provides tools and highlighted by the they are very small by three or four three value work with of net policy and each very and value and more you know thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Mr. Mohammedan. Though we could hardly listen to your precious words and all. I mean, there were a lot of technical glitches, I believe. But then, anyway, thank you so much. So we switch over to the next presenter, Ms. Lalita Sharma. Ms. Lalita Sharma.
Hello, ma'am. I'm done, ma'am.
Okay, okay. Thanks a ton. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Mohammedan.
Hello.
Hello.
Ms. Lalita
Hello.
Sharma, Assistant Professor.
Hello.
Yes, Ms. Lalita, over to you. Her title of the paper is Girish Kannad's Naga Mandala, the delineation of women in folklore. So please, over to you, Ms. Lalita Sharma.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Good evening to all. The title of my paper is Girish Kannad's Naga Mandala, the delineation of women in folklore. As we all know, folklore includes oral traditions such as tales, proverbs, shared beliefs, practices, customs, and other cultural elements of an ethnic or social group. It transmits by word of mouth and is ingrained in tradition and preserved in memory. Folklore includes folk tales and stories which pass down verbally from one generation to another. Each storyteller adds something new to existing accounts. And as we know, contemporary Indian drama in English focuses on history, legend, myths, and folklore. The veteran playwright Girish Kannad's play vividly represent this trend. Kannad used oral tradition and folklore in Kannada. Kannad plays are rich in Indian sensibility and explore Indian dramatic tradition. Kannad chooses to represent the rich plethora of myths and folklore embedded in Indian culture. He often retells legends and lore of contemporary social scenarios, which focuses on the complexity of human relationship in modern Indian society. He skillfully uses the principles and themes of Indian mythology, folk tales, and folk theatre, curtains, dolls, and the story within a story to create a new world in his plays. He uses myths and folklore to suit his philosophy and to retell myths and legends in the present age. He incorporates mythical elements to portray the social structure of contemporary Indian society. This paper explores how successfully Kannad had used myths and folk tales to represent the condition of women in his play Nagamandala. It is an endeavor to analyze the character of Rani, who is a typical Indian woman, ready to suffer at the hands of her husband. The paper also seeks to examine the dynamics and dimensions of Rani's journey from a marginal position to a central one in her martial life in folklore. Kannad portrays the character of a married woman Rani from an unconventional point of view to demonstrate that the society is puritanical and prejudicial to women. Kannad's play Nagamandala, a play with Cobra, is based on two oral Kannad tales, A Story and Song and The Serpent Lover, which he had heard from A.K. Ramanujan, the famous folklorist. He weaves the story of the play around the famous folk tale of love between human being and serpents. This play depicts the journey of an innocent girl to an empowered woman who acquires her rights as a wife and asserts her authority as the lady of the house. Rani, the protagonist of the play, is an example of the condition of a typical Indian female ruled by the patriarchy and bound by social traditions, but whose spirits remain unbounded. This play combines male chauvinism and the oppression of women with patriarchal hegemony. It is a socio psychological study of subjugation of women in Indian society. The play also depicts that in the conventional Indian martial relationship, the husband enjoys all privileges to give orders. In the play, Rani's father arranges her marriage without her consent, and soon after her marriage, her husband Aparna starts her operation. He ignores her existence as a human being. Being helpless, Rani suppresses her sexual, social, and psychological longings. On the other hand, Aparna betrays her by indulging with his concubine. Rani knows all but tolerates passively. Rani, an innocent girl who is married to a wealthy man, Aparna, comes to her husband's house, but that day was the beginning of Rani's imprisonment in her own home. Aparna visits his wife Rani just to have food and locks her in her own house throughout the day and night. No one is allowed to see and talk to her. Aparna spends his night with his concubine. He treats his wife as a maidservant who looks after the house and cooks food for him. She followed his orders and did not have the right to utter even a single wish. She is left alone at night. Rani does not dare to question Aparna and better her condition due to the conditioning she has undergone in her patriarchal setup. The play also focuses on those women in society who do not question due to their upbringing in a patriarchal structure. Women are timid, shy, and submissive, and they have lost their capacity to question. They do not dare to ask about the exploitative system. However, when a woman violates the prescribed patriarchal norm, she is questioned immediately. But the same is not the case for men who are free to do as they please. A blind old woman helped a blind old woman whose name was Kurudeva. She helps her by giving magic roots. The magical effect of roots is also a part of our folklore and how the roots of some plants can hypnotize someone. In myths and folklore, use of magic tricks and witchcraft is widespread. Kannad also incorporates the folk belief of the effect of root or jadi booty on humans as well as non-human. Rani mixes the paste of small roots in Aparna's glass of milk, and Aparna sleeps, and when he wakes up, he locks the door from outside and goes away. When the first root doesn't work, Kurudeva suggests Rani to feed Aparna the larger root. When Rani mixes the paste of the larger root in curry, the color of the curry turns red as blood. She dropped the idea of feeding this curry to her husband because she doesn't want to harm her husband, though Aparna mistreats her. She says, how could he possibly not see this boiling blood, this poisonous red? And then, even if he doesn't see it, how do I know it is not dangerous? What will my fate be? That little piece made him ill. Who knows? Rani tries to get rid of it, and Kannad shows the emotional attachment of a woman with her spouse, even being oppressed by him. She doesn't want to harm him. Sorry. So Rani pours the curry into the ant hill. A king cobra who lived in that ant hill lifts its hood, sees Rani, and follows her. Watches her, and when her husband leaves her alone after sleeping, King Cobra enters into Rani's house. Cobra and Naga approaches Rani in the form of Aparna and gently caresses her and praises her. But Rani is unable to utter even a single sentence. Naga says that now he will regularly visit her at night, and when Rani sleeps, Naga goes to the drain pipe and turns into his original self and slithers away. However, when Aparna comes in the morning, Rani asks him, but when did you go away? She doesn't get any answer. And Aparna baths, then eats silently, and as usual, leaves her. Since then, Naga regularly visits Rani at night. Rani's womanhood gets meaning in this relationship. In this context, I quote, Behra In reality, however, she finds herself wooed by a cobra in the form of a man. So, former being a man in the form of an animal, the later an animal in the form of a man. This love making between human and snake have references in the Mahabharata as well as in our myths. The love between Arjuna and snake princess Yulupi and Bhima and snake princess Nagabala, which is also the part of our oral tradition, authenticate the story of Rani and Naga. When Rani tells Naga about her pregnancy, he tells her to keep it a secret. Rani is amazed by his reaction. When Apanna, the real husband, knows about Rani's pregnancy, he becomes furious. He accuses her of having an illicit relationship with someone and drags her into the street. Apanna goes to the village elders for judgment. Rani locks her from inside. When Apanna, Naga, comes at night, she asks him in utter dejection, "Why are you humiliating like this?" Apanna, who is in the form of, who is Naga, says that village elders will make a judgment in your favor. Rani is amazed at why he complained to village elders if he was worried about her. Naga tells her that when she has to prove her innocence before elders, you ask them to undertake some ordeal and take your oath by the cobra who lives in the ant hill under the banyan tree. Rani is fearful about the cobra's bite. Naga assures her, "No, it won't bite you. Only you must tell the truth." Rani is told to undertake a red hot iron ordeal to prove her innocence, but she chooses to swear by the cobra. When she reaches the anthill, she feels scared and runs villagers to help. But finally, she goes to the anthill and brings the cobra out without any harm. And she says, I quote, "Since coming to this village, I have been held by this land. Only two, my husband and this cobra. Yes, my husband and this king cobra, except for these two, I have not touched anyone of the male sex, nor have I allowed any other male to touch me. If I lie, let the cobra bite me." But the cobra doesn't bite her and moves over her shoulder like a garland. Seeing this, village elders call her a divine being, a Devi, a goddess, a miracle. The crowd of villagers falls at her feet. Rani undertakes the snake ordeal and receives the status of goddess after passing it. Kannad mocks the very concept of patriarchy by making Apanna a faithful husband of Rani at the end of the play. Her husband Apanna realizes his mistake, accepts her with all humility and feelings of sincere remorse and repentance. Eventually, Rani got everything she wished for, and she lived happily ever after with her husband, child, and servant. Thus, Rani was able to decide her fate. Myths and folktale use not only to frame the plot, but also focus on the human psychology and the relationship that exists between them. In this play, Kannad combines myth and reality, past and present, and portrays mythical character which emerges as archetype manifestation of general human characteristics, placed in a contemporary context and dealing with existing situation. In the original Kannad folktale, a snake assumes the form of the prince and woos the beautiful princess. When the actual prince comes to know about this, he exterminates the snake. But in Kannad play, Nagamandala, both Rani and Apanna lived happily. Nagamandala not only upholds the traditional significance of the institution of marriage, but exposes the evils of female exploitation in a male-dominated or husband-centric society. In this way, Kannad portrays the distress of a woman in a patriarchal society in which a man enjoys privileges and the husband is one who torments and deserts his wife for another woman. Here, Bhasin states that patriarchy is used more generally to refer to male domination, to the powerful relationship by which man dominates women, and to characterize a system whereby women are kept subordinate in a number of ways. The institution of marriage is ultimately vindicated, and Kannad exposes the exploitation of women and thus mocks the very idea of chastity and aims at the emancipation and empowerment of women. Kannad also depicts how marriage is a patriarchal institution that has always been unfair to women. Rani triumph in the snake ordeal and her subsequent elevation to the status of goddess suggests female empowerment and indicates unjust male domination. At the end of the play, Rani's story of uh, transformation charts out a course from a timid, frightened village girl through the stage of elegant, erotic love and wild sexuality into a self-confident mother figure. A woman is possessing transcendent love and power that includes and transcends all the possible roles of wife, mother, and mistress. Kannad gives multiple endings of the play. In one ending, Naga uses her magical powers and becomes the size of Rani's tresses, and Naga ties a tress into a knot and places it around his neck. And when Rani combs her hair, a dead cobra falls to the ground, and Rani says that because a cobra like father saves their son, he will perform cremation rites for the Naga. The true ending of the play asserts Rani's empowerment, and she tells her husband to cremate dead Naga and do the Pindadan ceremony annually by her son. At the alternate end of the play, a live snake falls out the Rani's hair on the floor. Aparna wants to kill it, but Rani hides it in her dark and dense locks, saying, "The hair is the symbol of the wedding bliss. Live in these happily forever." Rani accepts Naga as a lover and boldly invites her to stay in her hair. Nagamandala covers the theme of women's destiny, her purity, and societal role, and Kannad merges it with an unpredicted ending. Rani suffers pain and torture at the beginning of her married life, and she achieves a respectable position at the end of the play. The author highlights the changes occurring in Indian society and mentality through Rani's empowered status. The insecure, scared young girl finds within herself new courage and confidence and gains social respectability as she emerges victorious from the public trial. Rani's victory in the snake ordeal and her consequent rise to the category of goddess indicates women empowerment and accuses unreasonable male supremacy. This brings her a new sense of self-respect and confidence. As a mother, Rani was seen in the last part of the story to be an authority of the family with weight and decision-making power. At the end of the story, when Rani articulates her strange desires that the cobra has to be ritually cremated, the fire should be lit by their son. Moreover, every year on this day, their son would perform an annual ceremony in the memory of the dead snake. Aparna agrees and says, "You are the goddess herself incarnate. Any wish of yours will be carried out." It is a play on the liberation and empowerment of women who have to play an essential role in the revival of deteriorated social order. Now I will conclude my paper. Rani represents the common submissive Indian rural girl who becomes the victim of the unfair social order through the institution of marriage. In Indian society, men are considered superior to women, and women are brought up in such a way that they never see themselves as respectable individuals. In this play, Rani is like any woman who goes to her husband's house with sweet dreams and desires of blissful marital life. But she has to face another reality. Her husband locks her and goes away without telling her about her whereabouts. Kannad vividly portrayed the suffering of women in the patriarchal society of India. He dealt with gender issue in almost all his plays, and this is also one of the examples. He used folklore and history to voice his views regarding women's marginalized position in society. Rani in Nagamandala can be seen as a metaphor for the situation of a young girl in the joint family, where she finds her husband two totally different roles as an unknown person during the day and as a lover at night. Kannad combines myth and reality and portrays mythical character which emerges as the manifestation of general human characteristics placed in contemporary context and dealing with existing situation. So the aim of my paper was to highlight how the dramatist delineates women character through Kannada folklore and give a chance to his female character to express herself in the male-dominated society. This paper also explored the possibilities of treatment of folklore in a new socio-cultural realm. Thank you very much for listening me, and thank you, Chairperson Ma'am, and all the organizers and all the colleagues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma. That was an excellent paper. Um, may I move on to the next paper now? Um, SM Sufik Varija, if I am like pronouncing the name properly, SM Sufik Varija.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so the title of our paper is Reversal of Gender Roles and Troubled Familial Relationships as Found in Nadine Godimer's None to Accompany Me. So
Yes,
over
ma'am.
to you. Over to you. Please start up with your paper. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Sincerely thank you for giving me this opportunity to present my paper titled Reversal of Gender Roles and the Troubled Familial Relationships as found in Nadine Godimer's None to Accompany Me. So I would like to share my screen. Is my presentation visible, ma'am? Hello?
No, I'm
No.
sorry, it isn't.
Now, ma'am?
No, no, it isn't. Please retry.
Is that clear now, ma'am?
Yes, yes, now it's visible. Please carry on.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. When I have come across the title of this title of the conference, gender studies, I just thought of uh, taking it into another diversion, another view that whenever we come across the word patriarchy, we always think of the women are the only victims of patriarchy. But what I just thought of that, are women the only victims of patriarchy? And the answer I got was sometimes men also become the victims of patriarchy. So my paper is basically on one such victim, that is Didymus Makoma of Nadine Godimer's None to Accompany. Am I clear, ma'am? Hello?
Yes, 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 you are. Yes, you are. Please carry on.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. So before going into the presentation, I would like to introduce my title actually. So masculinity and femininity are the words which you are much familiar with. And this masculinity and femininity are actually constructed based on the society, but not on the genetical background. Right? And when we talk about patriarchy, this talks about the discrimination of women done, how women are discriminated by the male dominant community. And when we talk about sexism, yes, of course, sexism also talks about discrimination of women and girls, and reverse sexism talks about the discrimination of men and boys. So when here I have taken a one familial, a troubled familial relationship. So I have chosen one family. In that particular family, women is left with high profile careers and her husband, the men, were comparatively low profile jobs. Not their least thing, that they are comparatively given with low profile jobs. So the conventional gender roles in a family is actually broken. So what will happen when this conventional roles are broken? So before going into that, I just want to introduce the uh, author I have chosen. It's Nadine Godimer, and she is the white South African anti-apartheid writer, and she's a politician, activist, short story writer, novelist, essayist, lecturer, and go on. And she won Nobel Prize in the year 1991, and she is the first South African to be awarded with Nobel Prize. And she focused on the new South African society after the fall of apartheid. Excuse me, I think I have done. Shall I keep my screen like this, ma'am? Ma'am?
Yes.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. So after the fall of apartheid, she moved to the social issues, which new social issues which the South Africa has witnessed. Then, and when coming to Nantu Company is compared, it is almost the first post-apartheid novel. It's a novel of transition. This speaks about the political transition of the country, especially South Africa is moving from apartheid to democracy, and likewise, it is a transition within the families, right, from the male-dominant society, maybe the patriarchal society, or the men hierarchy within the marital couple. The hierarchy, when we talk about the hierarchy, man comes first, the husband comes first, and then the wife. So all these traditional or practiced procedures are well disturbed here. So this novel is called a novel of transition, and it also speaks about interwent private and political life of the South African society. And so when the novel begins, we are introduced to this Makoma family, who are called the returning heroes. They are Didymus Makoma and Sibonchile Makoma are the members of this family. They are the exiled freedom writers, and they are exiled for 20 years. And during their exile, they lived in London. And when the country got democracy, they come back from London to South Africa with their 16-year-old daughter, Empo. When they come back to the country, they have regained their names, and they got all their positions back actually in the country. And when talking about the apartheid era, it is a period of fear and uncertainty, especially for the freedom writers, because the freedom writers are arrested and kept in Robben Island, which is actually a prison where human rights are abused, and the solitary confinement. The people, the freedom fighters who are arrested were put in solitary confinement for months together without any interrogations or when under interrogation, and they are locked up for years without trial. They were not even brought to the courts for legal appeal also. Right. So when talking about this Robben Island, uh, so as I said earlier, the prisoners are locked up there and they are not. Am I clear, ma'am? Hello.
Yes, yes, yes,
Okay,
please
ma'am.
continue.
Okay.
Thank you.
They are given very inhuman treatment there. Even the murderers and the gangsters who are arrested and kept in that particular prison has bribed the wardens for their own survival. Such kind of cruel people also have to bribe the wardens for their survival. That is the position of that is the critical situation of Robben Island. So in one such position, when Didymus is in exile, he smuggles himself into South Africa to post a letter through Veera Stark, one of the fellow freedom fighter, who is of course who is a white person. So he was very much uh, uh, frightened about visiting his country, because this is the position of the freedom fighters. They will be kept in the Robben Island. So he is much nervous and he is frightened in this visit. So he risks his life to do his duty towards his country. So after coming to their country, after getting the democratic South Africa, so Didymus started organizing protocols, press conferences, and he was invited to talk about graduation address in a college. And then he is one of the first delegations to talk with white business people. And whereas his wife was appointed as a deputy director of that particular movement's regional redeployment program. And when talking about the political and professional life, um, so after the movement's election, after a few years of time, the movement has announced the election. And after the elections, when the results were announced, the position of the husband and wife, Sibonjali and Didymus, were switched. Didymus was not elected. He was assigned to write the history book, while Sibonjali is elected as the member of the Central Executive. So what are the problems comes after that particular election is, I have just given in a table. So Sibonchili, because of her 20 years of exile, she is living in London. She is much influenced by white lifestyle. She is almost a white woman except for her color. But Didymus is not influenced much. He is deep rooted. He is uh, whether where when he was in London as well as when he is in South Africa, he was very much cultural and deep rooted in his culture. And when coming to Sibonchili, where they were provided with an temporary accommodation when they returned to South Africa. That temporary accommodation is a hotel room, but Sibonchili is not satisfied with the hotel room given to her, and that too is a temporary accommodation. But she is not happy with that. She shouts at her husband that she cannot live in such a condition. But Dedima's success is also a wonderful condition because we know the state of his country. It is a country which is now emerging into a democratic one. So giving them a place to giving them an accommodation itself is a wonderful concession to him. So later, eventually, when she is trying to set her house, she is she is going after luxurious things and beautiful things. But Didymus is he is much satisfied with the simple things, whatever is available. Especially when coming to the kitchen utensils, Sibonchli is not satisfied with her mother-in-law's kitchen utensils, which are they are very simple. But Didymus, he has much some kind of an emotional attachment towards her kitchen utensils. Then, when coming to after her getting elected as the new executive, she becomes the absent wife and the absent mother. That is, she gives more importance to her professional life. She leaves the house early in the morning when Didymus is taking his coffee and reaches home very late when Didymus and his daughter Empho are on bed. So it is she becomes very slowly she becomes an absent wife and an absent mother. So because of her absence, Didymus gives more importance to his family life, especially he takes care of his daughter well. And whenever there arises a problem in the family, she eventually simply shouts her husband. When Empo complains that she cannot speak or communicate with the girls in the South African in the neighborhood, she eventually shouts her husband for not teaching her their language. But actually, it is not not the fault of Didymus or not the fault. It is the fault of both Sibonchili and Didymus. Both of them haven't taught her their language, either Sibonchali Zulu or Didymus Xhosa. Both the languages are not taught to their daughter. She is very much fluent in English, and that is not known to the neighbor girls of her own age in her neighborhood. So Sibonchali shouts at her husband for that. And later, when she is not satisfied with the home she was provided, again she shouts at Didymus that I cannot live like this and all such things. And later, some 2 or 3 years after, she finds that her daughter is pregnant. That is in her affair with a person, Opwa, who is married with children actually. So again, eventually, she just shouts at her husband, saying that you haven't taken care of that. Why did you bring her here? Let her be there in London. So being a schoolgirl, pregnant, and
Miss
also
Miss Varija, I'm
yes,
sorry to interrupt you. Could you please conclude your paper because we're running
okay,
short of
ma'am.
time? Yeah,
Okay,
thank
ma'am.
you.
Sure, ma'am.
Thank you so
Sure.
much.
So in short, Sibonchali is uprooted and Didymus is deep rooted in this culture. So in short, I'm just trying to wind up. So Didymus is left as a troubled husband because the traditional vision of the hierarchy within the married couple is disturbed. So as I have mentioned earlier, Didymus takes his daughter Empho to her classes, to the dentist and all other things, and he slowly becomes the caretaker of the family. Whenever there arise a complaint over his plumbing work and telephone work, all such things he started taking care of, and he is ready to do whatever was needed for a peaceful family life. And the findings of the study is the traditional vision of the hierarchy within the Makoma couple is revisited in relate to the novel none to a company. Right? The gender hierarchy in the family is reversed because Shivanjali could not perform the traditional role in her family. So very slowly, Didi must take this particular role. So the conclusion of my paper is whether men are traditional or non-traditional, they are ready to reconsider their career ambitions nobly and to focus to care for the future of their children. So whatever it may be, future of the children is more important, whether to a father or to a mother. So men are ready to reconsider their career ambitions, right? And that is the need of the era, and that also suits to this particular present pandemic situation. So with that, I would like to finish my presentation, ma'am.
Okay, okay. Thank you, Varija, Ms. Varija.
Sufik
Uh,
Sufik Vareja.
Sufik Varija. I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
May I pass on to the last paper for this session, Mr. Rajdeep Das.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Is I am audible, ma'am?
Yes, you are perfectly audible. And the title of his paper is Gender in Government Policies, a study of Swachh Bharat Abhiyan with special reference to role of women.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah,
Good
you're most
evening to
welcome.
all. I am Rajdeep Das. I was a research scholar from the Department of Political Science from Assam University, Silchar. I am basically from Assam. It is the northeastern part of India. So before presenting my paper, first of all, I like to congratulate the organizers for organizing such a mega conference, and also I am very thankful to them. Today they gives me this opportunity to come in front of you and share my thoughts. So without further delay, I am going to present my paper, and my paper is titled, and the title of my paper is uh, Gender in Government Policies, a study of Swachh Bharat Abhiyan with special reference to role of women. So, ma'am, can I share my screen?
Yeah, surely. Please go ahead. Surely.
Is it visible, ma'am?
Now, yes, yes. Now it is visible.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Welcome.
So before introduction, I like to say that the main objective of my paper is to analyze how this Swachh Bharat Abhiyan played an important role in making India healthy and progressive. As we know that it is very essential to learn about cleanliness, sanitization, and various diseases that are caused due to poor and hygienic conditions. As we know that a healthy nation is a developed nation. So, in this paper, my primary objective is to analyze how this Swachh Bharat Abhiyan played an important role in making India healthy and progressive with special reference to role of India. So, in India, there is a huge human practice of defecation in open rather than into a toilet. People may choose, especially in rural areas, field or other open spaces for defecation. They do so either because they do not have a toilet readily accessible or due to traditionally cultural practices. According to WHO, open air defecation is the riskiest sanitization practice of all. In 2014, India was the country with the highest number of people practicing open defecation, around 530 million people. We know that Mahatma Gandhi, our father of the nation, had always dreamed to make India a clean India and had has always maintained his hard efforts for maintaining cleanliness in India. So Mahatma Gandhi once said that sanitization is more important than independence. So to meet the vision of Mahatma Gandhi, it was in 2014 at Rajghat. Our Prime Minister Sri Narendra Modi had inaugurated the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan mission. So Swachh Bharat Abhiyan in India. The Swachh Bharat initiative aims to clean up the streets, roads, and infrastructure of the various cities, towns, and rural areas across India. The main objective of Swachh Bharat Abhiyan is to eliminating open defecation with the help of construction of household-owned and community-owned toilets and establishing an accountable mechanism of monitoring toilet use. So the main objective of Swachh Bharat Abhiyan is to reduce open defecation and improve management of municipal solid waste in both urban and rural areas. So in India, 35 states and union territories and 699 districts and 5.99 lakh villages were declared open defecation free by 25th September 2019. It is World Health Organization has in its report stated that at least 180,000 diarrheal deaths were averted in rural India since the launch of Swachh Bharat Abhiyan mission. So Swachh Bharat Abhiyan mission in India with special reference to role of women. We know that gender is an important notion in sanitization and hygiene because women often have the primary responsibility for facilities and practices in the household. Women face threat to their life and feel unsafe while seeking toilet facilities or while going out for open defecation. So I can give some examples. For in May 2014, there was an incident where two girls were found raped and murdered in a village called Badon in Uttar Pradesh. It was a case that shocked the entire country with its brutality. It was a case that tragically highlighted another glaring issue faced by almost 300 million girls and women across our country. These sisters of Badon had gone out to the fields at night to relieve themselves. They thought there would be safety in numbers and went out together. They had no toilets at their home and had always relieved themselves in the bamboo field close by. But that fatal night, they did not return. So, from various studies, it was found that the women who use open defecation sites like open fields or the sites of railway track are twice as likely to get raped when compared to with women using home toilet. So, however, after the implementation of Swachh Bharat Abhiyan in India, we cannot deny the relevance of this mission. I can cite the example. For example, 105 years old Kanwar Bai from Chhattisgarh. It seems incredible, but for 100 years of her life, she relieved herself from in the open. She had never even heard of a toilet. Once she heard about
Mr. Rajdeep, I'm sorry to interrupt, but please be brief and fast. We're running short of time.
Yes, ma'am. I am concluding it.
Thank you so much.
Yes. So these 105-year Kanwar Bai, she sold her goats to construct a toilet in her house. She also not satisfied with just that. She campaigned on until her entire village was declared open defecation free. So there was another example, no toilet, no bride policy. So it was an example of a male-dominated panchayat in Haryana, where they decided on a no toilet, no bride policy. Women from their village would not be married into household that had no toilets. There was another example that is from northeastern part of India. The name of the village is Patgao from Assam. So finally, I came to my conclusion that though there are many critics or many opposition parties, they criticize this Swachh Bharat Abhiyan mission. They raise the issue that the reality reported by the independent survey was very different from that reported by the sponsored surveys of the villages. Districts and towns and cities and even states declared themselves open defecation free based on the achievements of the construction of only targets. However, it cannot be denied that Swachh Bharat mission played an important role in for maintaining cleanliness in India, reducing defecation in India, for which diarrheal deaths were averted in rural India. Swachh Bharat Abhiyan is an unique step towards achieving the objectives of an inclusive and clean India. Swachh Bharat Abhiyan for women has been the shift it is affecting in the perception of women from the victims to leaders. So I can say that Swachh Bharat Abhiyan played an important role in making India healthy and progressive because the ability because the Abhiyan assumes greater relevance, bringing in its scope issues of women's safety, their access to higher education. So by this statement, I concluded this presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So I open the house for discussion. I mean, the first question that comes over is Mr. Kes. And the question is to Mr. Muamran. Mr. Muamran, are you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. The question
Yes,
to you is, why women feel that they did not take their rights and are oppressed in front of men?
Like I said, ma'am, women are represented. Women are not represented formally. Doesn't mean that they don't have a voice. It's just the practices that women are, since the selection process, there is no election in what we call selection process. People select there is only selection only. As a result, preference are given to men, but that doesn't mean that women doesn't have a voice. So as a result, though they are not part of the village council, they are not selected. Their issues or their rights are being taken care of. That's why they don't feel the need that they don't feel the need to be part of the village council. That's what they have what we call highlighted, ma'am.
Yes, I like to extend one comment in connection to yours that Judith Butler says that there has been a radical exclusion of women from the hegemonic cultural formation. So that means that women have been excluded from the system as well. So and that is the reason they are oppressed in front of men and they cannot take their rights. So shall we move on to the next question?
Yes, ma'am. Dr. Mustafa from Iraq. Is he here? Dr. Mustafa?
No, the question is to Dr. Muamran itself. And Dr. Mustafa, are you there? Probably he's left. Dr. Mustafa? I guess he's left. Shall we move on to the next question?
Yes.
Okay, the next question is to Dr. Sharma, Lalita Sharma. How can we see Rani victory in the view of modern feminism and women empowerment if it was gained through the help of another male in the form of the serpent? Seham Osama, are you there?
Hello? Hello? Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Hello?
You are audible, but the intellectual who has asked you the question is not there. So I think we'd want to listen to your voice. Please continue.
Osama and I am here. I'm listening to you.
Hello?
Ma'am.
Yes, Sehem
Hi.
Osama is there. So please continue with your answer, Dr. Sharma.
Osama ma'am, my answer to the question is, as in the Indian scenario, women issues are always raised by men. Means it is Raja Ram Mohan Rai, Ishwar Chand Vidyasagar, Gandhi, and Tagore. So women are always supported by men. We cannot say that women are empowered just because they are doing this due to their capacity. Yes, they are doing it due to their capacity, with their talent, with their caliber. But there is always a family support behind them, and we cannot deny that, because men and women makes the family complete. So even in this age of empowerment, women are working outside. And I don't think, this is my personal opinion, that women cannot work properly if they don't have family support or a husband support. So if Rani's victory and Rani's empowerment is due to the male support, there's nothing wrong in it, because men and women both are the part of the society. Thank you.
In extension to Dr. Sharma, I'd like to make you remind of The Color Purple by
Yes.
Alice Walker. If you remember, Sophia becomes the catalyst to success of
Sorry for
Sally.
interruption,
So there
please.
are catalysts, right? So this man becomes a catalyst for the success of women empowerment.
Yes.
Okay, so there are catalysts who make the change happen. That is why she taking help of another male who's just a catalyst, either a male or female. About
Yes.
that. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Dr. Roshan, please.
Yes, Dr. Mustafa is here. Dr. Viva,
Yes.
please.
Yes, thank you so much for giving us this opportunity. And I have a question to Dr. Momerine about his conclusion. He says no alternative to the tribal system. How is that? You mean he is supportive for the tribal system?
Can I go ahead, ma'am?
Yes, please. Sure.
Okay, thank you for the question. The conclusion is not my conclusion. It's based on interview that I've held with the villagers. What the villagers are saying is that they are not in favor of the election system in the villages, because it will create this unity in the village, and it will create enmity among the villagers. This is because of the state. It is because of the use of money, muscle, and violence that we witnessed during the state government election. So they are in favor of this continue with this tribal system of governance, because what we want from a governance: stability, peace, freedom, and where the weaker sections needs are taken care of. So what they are saying is that it's like a community, villages like a community, and those who are in the power, whoever is in the power, they looks after the welfare of all the sections of the society. So that's why they are in favor of this system. I won't say 100% of them, but more than majority of them are in favor of this continuation of this tribal system of governance. Thank you, sir.
So in connection to your observation, I'd like to add one statement by Gayatri Spivak. When she said that we need a strategic approach towards the inculcation of women in the political program. So wherein I think that strategic approach would work. So that is why this particular, like the paper has been dealt with in a particular format. So the tribal system answers the entire ecological approach, the psychological approach, and everything answers to this particular, the Spivak statement answers to that particular approach. So are there any questions? Any more questions?
Yes, ma'am. I have one query to
Surely, go ahead.
Dr. Barija. What are the differences you have seen in Nadine Gordimer's novels during apartheid time? She is the figure of apartheid time as well, and post-apartheid time also, like Jem could be right. So What are the differences you have seen in her writing regarding the female presentation and apartheid issues, and how you see post-apartheid novel, and what are the issues? Are there similarities, or there is a different subject, the target of the audience, or the target of the character? Just in a short, my question is quite big and long, so just short, just give us
Sure, ma'am. Sure, ma'am. So
so that
to answer your question, I select a few novels from few novels of Nadine Gordimer. From that, you can understand her. Actually, her novels are her own political views that we have to keep in mind. What she thought of, what is her political stand, is reflected in her novels. Especially when we take about her novel Berger's Daughter, and this speaks about freedom fighters, especially Lionel Berger's daughter is Rosa Berger. So what she think? What does she has in mind is she is very much tired of being a freedom fighter. Right from her maybe from a schoolgirl age of 6 or at the age of 12, she was waiting outside a prison to pass a message to a prisoner there. So she is very much tired of doing all such works, and moreover, her father and her mother both are the activists. So at a particular point of time, especially after the death of her parents, she's just thinking of taking a gap. Why shouldn't I have my personal life there? This is what she is thinking of. So when we talk about the protagonist, this is the, but at the same time, she is introducing another character who is Zinzala. He is otherwise known as, they have a pet name, not a pet name, they have named him in a particular, they have given him another name, which is, sorry if I am not wrong, it is Bossy. So Bossy's name is Zwelzindrama, which means suffering land. But Bossy means he is much, what is it? He is much privileged. That is what Bossy, something like that. So through that character, she is bringing out the what the blacks are thinking of the whites, and the whites what the whites are thinking of it. So throughout her novel, apart from this anti-apartheid fight, freedom fight, and all those things, she wants to establish a healthy relationship between the blacks and the whites. So, during this period, there arises another movement called Black Conscious Movement, BCM, Black Conscious Movement. This particular movement rejected any kind of help from the whites. Even the sincere white anti-apartheid fighters who had sacrificed their families, sacrificed their own personal life, their whatever they have done towards the country, everything is totally rejected, and the black people are united under one umbrella, that is their skin color. So either writing during the apartheid period or after this post-apartheid period, she is concentrating on what is it? A relationship between a healthy relationship between the black and the white. So whatever novel she has written, whenever you choose the novel, as I have mentioned, this Berger's Daughter, and the None to Accompany Me, that is what the paper I have presented on that. Actually, the protagonist is a white lady. And these people are the secondary category. The Makoma family is the second grade characters there. So in each and every novel, she fixes certain rules to be followed by the whites and certain things to be followed by the blacks. So we cannot take her novels, or we cannot judge her novels based on the protagonist. So we have to go through all the characters in a novel, right? So if
because her characters are also black, during a party she talked about black. Then
yes,
when she talked about in My Son story colored identity as well, then she talked about white identity also, and then her gender also. If you see the House Gun novel, yes, her character always has been changing according to the situation.
There is another novel which is titled July's People. There she blames the black people who are not involving themselves in the freedom fight. because they are much influenced by the white lifestyle, and they want to live like the whites. So she's just condemns those people who are not involved in the freedom fight. Not only the white she is condemning the blacks who are also not involved in this freedom fight. So we cannot make her as a white anti-apartheid writer. She is an anti-apartheid writer. That's what I found from her novels.
Thank you. Thank you, Varija ma'am. Thank you so much. I believe that your paper was more over about the intersectionality of the approaches, right? And it reminds me of Toni Morrison's Beloved as well.
Yes.
Because,
excuse me.
Yes, because I was thinking about Beloved all the time that you were delivering your discourse. So may I conclude the session? Dr. Roshan, may I conclude the session? Okay, so my observation.
Sorry for interruption. I'm sorry
I
for
think
interruption.
Mustafa has another query.
Yes,
Yes,
I
have another question for Dr. Rajdeep Das, I think his name. His paper about the sanitation, the water circuit in the public places. I think this paper is very important for female. And so many female, they are suffering from this phenomenon. I have a question. Maybe this is, I have so many curious for this presentation. This is critical and activity and practical. So I was in India and I saw many women. By the way, I'm Iraqi, not Indian. I'm close friends for Dr. Roshan. We always in touch with her. So I have a question for Dr. Aidid. What the government rule for this phenomenon? Do the government make anything for this, or say the situation like this is bad? I'm sorry for this word. I'm so sad for this phenomenon. This is India, a very big city and very huge economical, and the challenge all the big countries like China and American. So when any visitor came to the Indian and see this is bad phenomenon, he left some bad impressions to the country. For question to the Dr. Aidid, do anything government make solution or for this problem? Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir, for raising this question. Sir, once again, sorry, I'm not doctor. I was scholar.
Yeah. Okay. You will be, inshallah. You will be.
Okay. Thank you. So I like to say that recently, actually, the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan plan was, this mission was firstly adopted for 5 years. That is from 2nd October 2014 to 2nd October 2019 to make India open defection free, to make India a clean India and green India. For this initiative, this Swachh Bharat Abhiyan mission was started. So after the 2nd October 2019, recently, the government of India has made the guideline for Swachh Bharat Abhiyan Mission 2, and they also made a budget proposal for 1,40,881 crore allocated in February 2020. So I think the government of India is taking various steps, various plans to implement this initiative, to make this initiative successful. So I think that in near future, in coming days, India will definitely be an open defection free country. So I like to conclude my answer by saying that.
I hope so that.
Okay. Thank you everyone for those beautiful questions and the answers as well. So my comments on the particular session are numerous because the papers were excellently presented And actually the research papers were there, field research and the literature as well. The first two papers by Utsu Chakraborty and Muamran Songin were based lots on, and as well this the last paper by Rajdeep Das. Every I think all the papers were based on field work and more analytical, and they gave us a view about the contemporary times, and as well as, because we are literature people, we are studying into the books and all that. The field work remains kind of an undone scenario for us, but they were very nice papers because analysis about several aspects were given, and various kind of oppressive states for women, like in various fields, were highlighted. And I congratulate the presenters. For about Lalita Sharma and Ms. Sufik Warija, the papers were highly literally presented, and I believe that Dr. Lalita's paper was my most favorite one, as in lots of reference to myth, mythology, folklore. It reminded me of Zorani Lastel's The Rise of Watching God, where folklore and myth was highlighted a lot. And Dr. Varija's paper reminded me of Toni Morrison, as I earlier said. Now, the different aspects about women, about the you can say the mythological references, as in Dr. Lalita's paper, it was reference to folklore and archetypes as well. So in my opinion, Sita, Draupadi, Ahilya, so many archetypes exist, and thoughts about feminine characters like virginity in scriptures, while we are referring to Kunti, when menstruation is considered to be profane, widowhood is a blemish, as in Rabindranath Tagore. There is one more practice that is called Sutak, that happens just after childbirth. So many things, so many archetypes exist in our folklore, as well as in our ancient myths and mythologies. And I am happy to congratulate you, Dr. Lalita, as well as Sufik Warija. Your paper was excellently done. Congratulations to all the presenters. Thank you, Dr. Roshan. Thank you, Dr. Sylvester.
Thank you.
All the organizations. Please be safe, take care of yourself, and have a great day. Thank you so much.